G'day you mob, Pete here, and this is another episode of Aussie English, the number one place for anyone and everyone wanting to learn Australian English. So today I have a Goss episode for you where I sit down with my old man, my father, Ian Smissen, and we talk about the week's news, whether locally down under here in Australia or non-locally overseas in other parts of the world. Okay, and we sometimes also talk about whatever comes to mind, right? If we can think of something interesting to share with you guys related to us or Australia, we also talk about that in the Goss. So these episodes are specifically designed to try and give you content about many different topics where we're obviously speaking in English and there are multiple people having a natural and spontaneous conversation in English. So it is particularly good to improve your listening skills. In order to complement that though, I really recommend that you join the podcast membership or the academy membership at aussieenglish.com.au, where you will get access to the full transcripts of these episodes, the PDFs, the downloads, and you can also use the online PDF reader to read and listen at the same time. Okay, so if you really want to improve your listening skills fast, get the transcript, listen and read at the same time, keep practicing, and that is the quickest way to level up your English. Anyway, I've been rabbiting on a bit, I've been talking a bit. Let's just get into this episode, guys. Smack the bird, and let's get into it. Alrighty. Dad, how's it going?
Good, Pete. Cheers.
Yeah, cheers. What do you got there? Cranky misses?
Cranky misses. I'm not
yay.
sure to whose misses this actually refers, so it must be mine. Yours is never cranky.
They're very Australian, though. This one's cockies, so cockatoos.
Yes.
You can probably see on there. I don't know. Boom.
Yeah, a bit too
IPAs.
far away. IPAs, yeah. Local Australian ones. This is Aries Inlet. I think that's from Torquay, cockies, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's funny how much they've blown up. I think the local place that I go to, what is it called? Blackman's, right, has gone absolutely bonkers with how many beers they offer. They sell burgers and everything. And that seems to be an interesting thing, like with the whiskery, where a lot of places now are realising that there's quite a bit of money in having your own restaurant and therefore place that you can have people taste your product and buy your product directly as opposed to trying to get into big outlets. Yeah,
look, I think so. And I think sometimes... I mean, you can probably talk to Russ about this.
Russ is the owner of the
whiskery.
I guess there's a bit of a backstory there. I recently went and talked to them about volunteering there to learn a bit about making whiskey this week. Yeah. They kindly said yes, so that'll be fun.
So, which it'll be great fun.
Yeah, definitely.
We'll call you the apprentice now. So, it'd be interesting to get his point of view as to why when you create a distillery, a lot of them, and a lot of wineries do the same thing, they have... sales through the place. So you're not just producing it in isolation and then sending it out to outlets to sell. But as soon as you want to sell it through your own door, then I think it means that you've really got to offer food as well, because you want that. Certainly for me, I'm much more likely to go and buy something from an outlet like the whiskery or a winery if I can taste something on the spot. Exactly. And if I can taste it, I want the experience of sitting down with friends when you're allowed to, and having a good time there, rather than just walk up and say, can I have 2 bottles of that, and then walk away. Because I might as well just go to the local bottle shop.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no point in having to go to the actual manufacturer to buy something if I don't get more than what I can get from going to the local outlet.
Well, how have you noticed that change in your lifetime? Because even in my lifetime on the Bellarine Peninsula here, I've noticed that a lot of wineries around the place have popped up. First and foremost, they popped up and started making wine, but then they tend to also have restaurants or places you can go inside of their,
get tours of the
warehouse and everything like that.
Brewery or the distillery.
You can do tastings, and so I think...
And some of them even have big event locations. There's a couple of wineries around the Geelong area that, in fact, 3 or 4 of them, that can have 1,000 people.
Marriages at wineries nowadays is a big thing too, right?
Yeah, they have music acts come and outdoor music acts and so on. So they obviously become event centres, obviously centred on the products that they are manufacturing and selling. But it's a good idea to offer something more than just come along here and buy a couple of bottles of wine.
Well, I think that they must be realizing, and this was the same thing with Aussie English, if we really want to get into sort of business, and niching down is a big thing. I learned a lot about that from a podcast called Smart Passive Income, which was about making money online through businesses. And his expression that his name is Pat Flynn. You guys may have heard of him if you are obviously podcast listeners and into online business. His expression or saying back then was the riches are in the niches.
Yeah.
Mispronunciation of niche there, by the way, Americans. Although they always hit back. I always say it's not niche, it's niche. It's a French word. And they'll be like, it's a fillet. It's not a fillet of fish.
So
I'm like,
everybody
whatever.
mispronounces something. Touche or touchy, as the case may be.
Yeah, that's it. Touche. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, well, that's it. So with Aussie English, I was like, well, I'm not just going to try and be another English podcast. I want to go to Australian English and niche down and try and help people with this, smaller niche. But as a result, I have to sell pretty unique products and get people to come to me and, do all these things. And it seems to be the same for these kinds of wineries or distilleries or, beer distillery places where they realize, look, there's money to be made, but I can't try and be the next VB or the next Penfolds, which gets, sent distributes worldwide. It's more, I need to tie that in with a local experience and local business and everything.
And it's sort of an anachronism too, and your business is similar in that you diversify within a niche.
Yeah.
So you identify a niche, but then you've got to have a diversity of products and services.
Yeah.
Because if it was all just one thing, then you're really counting on a very specific part of the potential audience, in your case, or customers, to continue your business to grow. Whereas if you've got a variety of products, and without giving too many secrets away about some of the things that we've been talking about in terms of Aussie English, it can't just be a podcast.
No.
And there's got to be other things, because different people are going to want different experiences.
Exactly.
And if we use the winery as a good example, some people will go to a winery just to do a tasting. They're happy to stand at a counter or a bar, have their tastings of the wine and go, yeah, I like that one. I'll have 2 of those and 3 of those and 2 of those, and then go away. Others are going to want to sit down and have a snack while they're tasting, or they're going to want to have a full meal. Some are going to want a tour of the winery.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of different elements of cohorts of people within the broader audience, even though it's a niche. So I think that's something that has been, getting back to your original question of what's grown in my time. Certainly, there were the large wineries around when I was younger, 40 years ago, and you could go and do winery tours and tastings and those sort of things.
But it was all the big
It was
places.
the big ones, and there are a few smaller sort of boutique wineries, and but wineries are very old.
Yeah.
Even in Australia, they're old. It was one of the first industries, agricultural industries, other than sheep and wheat, that started to pop up in Australia.
People had to have their alcohol.
Exactly. And so those sort of small-scale businesses were always around in the wine industry, but the distilling industry has really only kicked off in about the last 20 years in Australia for liquors like gin and whiskey. And beers, certainly when I was 20 years old, there was a Victorian brewery, and that was Carlton United, and there was a New South Wales one, and then there were 2 in New South Wales, and there was one in Queensland, and there was one in South Australia, and there's 1 or 2 in Western Australia. So if you didn't matter where you went within those states, you really were drinking 2 or 3 of the products within a single brand of beer. Now there are hundreds of craft breweries, some of which, even though they like to classify themselves as craft, are very large.
Yeah.
And they've got national distribution into bottle shops and those sorts of things, whereas they started off as, hey, here's a little brewery, come and try a few of our beers and buy some.
Well, have you noticed that people's tastes have changed? Because I imagine that back in the early 20th century, obviously before your time, a big part of it was trying to get consistency of products widespread so that you could go from somewhere like Sydney to Melbourne and be able to find the same products that you're used to, or, even from the US to Australia and find McDonald's.
Yeah,
exactly. But then once that market kind of got saturated and people got accustomed to that, oh, well, I can find this anywhere, and I guess too, it must have been tied in with overall wealth. the fact that people suddenly had more disposable income that they could spend on things like experiences, whether that's through food and drink and tourism and that sort of thing. Did that change around your sort of birth period in the 50s and growing up in the 60s and 70s, or is it much more recent where people are now like, all right, I have more money and I'm not going to go from Melbourne to Townsville and then go to Macca's. I'm going to look for an interesting local restaurant that I can't find back home because I want to experience something new, whereas I imagine your parents were much less likely to have the money to do that and potentially the interest to do that than you are, or even I am, or Noah will be.
Yeah, look, in terms of drinking alcohol, if we look at beer, because pub drinking was typically people went to the pub to drink beer. That was what people did. And yes, there are a few people who would drink a mixed drink, and it was very rare that somebody would go and ask for a glass of wine. And if you asked for a glass of wine, the choice is red or white, and you got given whatever they had. There wasn't. Now you can go to most local pubs, and they'll probably have 20 or 30 bottles of wine that they are happy to open and give you a single glass.
Yeah, do you want a Pinot Noir? Do you want
this? Do you want that? And they'll have
Shiraz.
multiple varieties of each of those types of grape. But, but certainly for beer, when I was a kid, the pub that my father and grandfather, local pub that my father and grandfather frequented, the main bar there, which at the time was men only, which was another a bit of a bizarre thing. Even in my lifetime, I sit there and look at it and go, really? And I remember a mother of sort of acquaintances. They weren't really friends, but the local kids that we knew, a mother of them who was a bit of a sort of feminist radical at the time. She used to keep getting thrown out of the bar because she would walk in and...
She had to be escorted by a man, I take it.
No, she wasn't allowed in there.
Really? Because I was watching, just to pause you there, I was watching The Peaky Blinders recently, which is based in the 20s and 30s.
It was the Troubles in Ireland.
Yeah, and... they had a scene where the women went into a bar, one of the Peaky Blinders, sisters, and she walks in and effectively just says her name because the woman going with her is like, women can't be in bars unescorted by a man or whatever. And she's like, I'm a Shelby, which is the main group. Yes. And so she walks in and they're all like, oh, Jesus.
Oh, it's a Shelby.
Exactly. But I was like, what? That was a thing? And you're saying, so even in the 50s and 60s.
In the 50s, 60s, then in the main, ironically, what used to be called public bars, and they weren't very public if they were
50%
only for
public.
Public bars were men only.
Was that for the protection of women and their purity?
I think there was an element of that. And funnily enough, my grandfather used to call it the spit and swear bar.
Okay.
And I think and so it really was that it was very rough in a sense of it wasn't rough in the sense of the clientele, but it was a tiled floor, so no carpets or anything, no seating except bar stools. Yeah. And the bar stools were fixed so that you could sit up at the bar, or they had a few of those sort of high bar type tables, the sort of round bar tables that were sort of chest high, the sort of same height as the bar, that were scattered around, but there was no seating. So you stood at the bar or you stood around drinking. And there was no buying. You couldn't go and buy a bottle or a can. You had to be served in a glass. And there were two sizes in Victoria.
On tap, right?
On tap. And there was usually only, three different maybe beers. There was Carlton Draft. Which
Victorian bitter.
Victoria Bitter
VB.
and Foster's Lager.
Yeah.
And that was a good bar, had those three.
What would a bad bar have?
Bad bar would just have Carlton Draft. And there's nothing wrong with Carlton Draft. It's a very nice draft beer. So there was no variety.
Yeah.
And a glass was 7 ounce. It's
a pot?
And a pot was half a pint, the equivalent of half a pint, 10 ounces. And
so you'd have even smaller than a pot.
Yeah, 2/3 of the size.
Oh, really?
3/4 the size.
So
pot is the smallest glass that you can actually buy now.
How would you?
It's a half a pint.
Nothing to even really compare it to here.
280 mils.
It's about sort of like up to about here.
Yeah,
right?
It's not as much beer as fits in one of these.
Yeah, exactly.
It's 3/4 of one of these.
And a pint would be this and about another third or
and
so.
you couldn't buy a pint. Pint was a very English thing.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Pints
basically
are like
you had a glass or a
about
pot.
that size, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you had a glass or a pot.
Yeah.
And a glass, a 7-ounce glass was a mouthful for most people.
Yeah.
You might sit and sip it, but you could just gargle
half
it
a
and it was
coffee.
gone. So that's what you could buy. Then if ladies wished to go to a pub, they would have to go to a saloon bar or a lounge bar.
It was a higher class,
Yeah,
kind of cleaner,
it had seats and
nicer
carpet
places.
in it. And it was darker as well. It was one of those weird things that, it was that sort of mood lighting, whereas the public bar was very bright.
So do you think that came out of a sexist, pejorative kind of culture, or was it more that these bars, we men who go here see this as a sort of non-feminine, very masculine, gross place that we don't think women would want to come to in the first place, but as a result, we'll say women can't come where you've taken it too far,
Now,
right?
I am a sort of social historian, but I haven't studied
Yeah.
pub going. It'd be an interesting thing to do. You've given me a project now.
Because there are some rough
nothing
women
else to do.
that go to the pubs these days, especially.
But
I remember my uni days. Good God.
Oh,
Some
yeah.
of the women there could drink me under the table.
yes. I think there was an element of that, certainly in Australia. So the Australian pub scene, and this is at a time with 6 o'clock closing.
Yeah.
So pubs closed at 6 o'clock.
Why is that?
That's just what they did. And I'm sure it all came down to this sort of social construct that married women didn't work.
Yep.
They worked at home, unpaid work at home, no question about that, but they weren't employed for money.
And this was because it was kind of seen as though they would be taking jobs from other men,
from married men
who were using that to support their wives and their families,
exactly.
right?
So there was this very sort of almost Victorian through to the 1950s period of married women didn't work. The pub was something that working men used to do almost on their way home.
Yeah.
You'd go and have a couple of drinks. And the pubs closed at 6 o'clock. And I don't think the pubs closed at 6 o'clock to force the men to go home. I think just the men were going to go home, so there wasn't any point in staying open any later.
Well, this is where I've seen... sorry to interrupt you.
No,
I've seen that film, I think, is it Nicola Carlotta, They're a Weird Mob?
They're a Weird Mob, yeah.
So that's made in the 60s, and it follows an Italian migrant who comes to Australia, and it's a really good film. You can find it on YouTube.
It's so Australian.
And that's the whole point.
And it's taking the piss out of the migrant experience and the Australiana that they have to get
so he effectively goes into Sydney and has to find a job, has to find somewhere to rent. He ends up getting a girlfriend, but the whole time the Australians are kind of taking the mickey, taking the piss out of him because he doesn't get what it is to be Australian, but at the same time they're kind of affectionate towards him and welcome him.
And they want to welcome him into the culture. Yeah.
But there's a scene in that where he does go into the pub to meet someone or after work or something with his mates, and you just see that it's a mad rush for everyone to get their drinks and everything.
You've got typically back in the day, certainly in the terms of working class people, factory workers and those sorts of things would work from 9 till 5.
Yeah.
So 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock, you had from 5 o'clock till 6 o'clock to get to the pub, have a couple of drinks, and then the pub was closed.
So you had an hour window.
So an hour window.
Was the pub open before 5?
It was open. Yeah, typically
the early bird
at 10 a.m. Although there were a lot of public bars. Theoretically, the pubs were open, but there are a lot of public bars that wouldn't open until midday. And so then I think there was then this experience that if you wanted to be drinking at the pub after that, you had to be a resident of the hotel. So you had to be staying at the hotel, and that's where the lounge bar was. The lounge bar was there not to particularly to service external customers coming in just for a drink. The lounge bar was there for residents of the hotel to go and have a drink before they went to the dining room to eat.
Well, for most for you guys to give you some sort of clarity here, most pubs were actually hotels as well.
So they'd
have rooms upstairs.
You rent a room for the night or the week or whatever else. Some people used to live in them permanently, which they still do.
Well, and this is, if you guys have seen the TV show Faulty Towers, it's kind of that sort of thing, right?
A little bit, that's sort of...
That wasn't a pub.
That was a private hotel.
But they had these people who lived there permanently.
People who lived there
you can imagine.
As well as the sort of day visitors and the short-term visitors. So I think that's where it all came from. And that the public bar was the bar that men went to drink at after work.
Yeah.
And then at about the time about my teenage years, the pubs started to stay open until 10 o'clock. And that's at the time that they also started to serve food. And so the public bar or
they
the
suddenly
lounge
had
bar
time
would
to
go,
do that.
oh, we can, and clearly there was a movement to, and it was a liquor licensing thing that, there wasn't just a personal choice of individual, owners of hotels as to how long they stayed open. It was a licensing issue that you couldn't stay open after 6 o'clock and then
or be fined.
10,
You'd be fined.
Yeah. In fact, you'd be closed down. You'd just lose your license. It wouldn't have been a fine back in those days. And so they moved to 10 o'clock at the same time that they started to offer food. And obviously that's, again, this sort of social thing of you don't know whether, this is a chicken or an egg thing, that if you're going to stay open until 10 o'clock, which you're now allowed to, the only way you're going to keep people there is to offer food. Mm-hmm. Because if they have to leave to get food, then they're not going to stay. They're not going to turn up at 5 o'clock after work and stay till 10 o'clock without getting food. And so there was that thing. And then that whole public bar thing started to disappear. As food was there, it was much more of a sort of a group social thing. Yeah. And so that's about the time that, I started going to the pubs in the mid-1970s. That had already been established. So the local pub that I went to, I can't remember ever going into the public bar. It was still open and it existed. When I was 18 and allowed, by Victorian law to drink alcohol.
Or to buy it.
Buy it. To walk into a pub and buy it and, sit down and drink it. But I don't remember ever going to the public bar for a drink because for me, going to the pub was where you go with your friends, some of whom were female. Yep. And even then in the mid-70s, it wasn't the law, and it was law at the time, the law had changed to allow people. So Mrs. McLean, thank you very much.
Mrs. McLean?
Yeah, she was the woman who was early on going in and disrupting the Beaumont Hotel, the public bar and getting thrown out. I'm just sort of referencing a story that I was telling earlier.
The feminist.
So the law had changed and women were then allowed. There wasn't, you couldn't distinguish locations in a pub and say, it's men only here and so on. Perfectly reasonable. Although why any woman, let alone any man, would want to sit in a public bar or stand in a public bar and drink beer when...
because they're told they can't.
The reason they did it was because it was cheaper. That a beer in the public bar was cheaper than it was in the lounge bar. And a few of us cheeky young bastards used to go and buy a beer in the public bar, and because there was a sort of sideways entrance that you could get around into the lounge bar, we then take it into the lounge bar. But
how do they not work that out?
They knew, but you'd sort of had to sneak it in. It wasn't, you didn't know 10 of you. You didn't go and buy 4 or 5 beers and sort of carry them through. Yeah. You'd just be drinking your beer
then walking around,
wandering around, and then you sort of sneak in. But they then blocked that off fairly quickly so that you couldn't do that. And I'm only using this just one pub experience, the local pub that I grew up near. But there were many others that were the same. By the mid-70s, though, most pubs had started to lose that sort of workers after work sort of, the 6 o'clock swill, and then the 10 o'clock closing thing.
Was there a nostalgia for that? Did people realise that was dying, or was that just a gradual thing and no one spoke about it? Because, when I look back, obviously there's a big difference between the 80s, the 70s, and then the 60s, 50s, and earlier. And
then the 2000s
compared to today. And so I see it and I'm like, man, I almost wish that we had that today where everyone finished work and then for an hour they all met at the same watering hole, the same place to have beers together and then went their separate ways.
See, now 50% of the workforce is women.
Well, yeah, obviously, I wouldn't prefer that it were all men or not. Yeah, I'd prefer everyone could go, but that everyone was pulled to a single area to be able to hang out together. Like,
go and socialise.
The older I get, the more I miss the fact that I was at school and university where you would be surrounded by 50 to 100 people on a regular basis that you could then hang out with.
Yeah, but would you prefer, let me give you this opportunity to contemplate. Would you prefer you finish work at 5, the pub closes at 6, so you almost got to race down to the
trade-off,
and then with your friends, sit down, have a couple of drinks, maybe one, maybe 2, and then the pub's closed.
No.
Or would you prefer the ability to go and sit down and go, well, maybe once a week we'll go down there and we'll sit and we'll have, even if it's just snack food, the old idea of bar food, of chips or little burgers or something like that. Or would you prefer the idea of saying, well, we can sit there and have a meal and we can stay here till midnight if we want to?
Yeah.
And then there'll be a band on, there'll be music on. And that used to happen as well at the that same hotel, the Beaumaris Hotel, which sadly no longer exists. And hello to all of my Beaumaris friends, who are sadly a suburb in Melbourne, who sadly have no pub there anymore.
Well, and your mother's house was just torn down as well.
Yeah, it's sort of this whole nostalgic thing, and I can't even go back and visit the vacant block of land.
Well, you can. It's just
I
not
can,
currently.
but I have to pay the fine.
Not currently.
So, we can't go to Melbourne. So those of us who are outside of Melbourne can't go in there, and those who are in Melbourne can't leave. But
does it feel weird when you get to a point where the house that you grew up in has been destroyed? Because you guys live up the road from me, and obviously I wasn't born here. We moved here when I was about 9, 10.
Yeah, you were 9.
But if that house were to be destroyed tomorrow, even if the block of land was still there, it's the house that has all the memories, right?
It does, yeah. It's not the location that has the memories. So.
Yeah, well, and I was saying that I think I was chatting to Mum the other day about Nana and Grandpa. I mean, they moved around quite a bit, her parents.
Yeah.
But they came from Queensland, and Nana's house is still there, I believe, but Grandpa's has been torn down.
Parents' house, yeah.
So I can't imagine as her. She is 89?
Yes, just turned
Happy 89.
Birthday, Bev.
But I can't imagine her going back there and being like, I was born in this house and the house is still there.
Actually, no, I apologise, Beverly. You're not 89 yet.
She's what, 88? Yeah, don't tell her that.
I doubt whether she'll be listening.
I forget what my age is now, so I can't imagine what it's going to be like when I get there. Anyway, yeah, good chat, Dad. Good chat.
Yeah, so, the good old days. I was thinking on my way over here, actually, that once we're allowed to travel out there and stuff, we should do some OB, some outside broadcasts and go to some of these places that I keep rabbiting on about and talk about them, or even to some of the local places, because, I mean, you used to do that a lot.
Yeah.
But even if we just go and sit in a local park and chat and, about stuff.
I think people are dying to go outside more often.
Exactly.
Good God.
Yeah. So, the news.
We'll finish up here for this one. See you soon, guys.
Bye.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Me and Noah, he's here as well, smacking the microphone with his spoon. That was another episode of the Goss. Don't forget, guys, if you want to get access to all of the Goss episodes, the transcripts, the MP3s, the videos, the entire episodes from 1 to, I think we're up to like 40-something now. Yeah, that's it, mate. Just go to aussieenglish.com.au and you can sign up for those. Anyway, I'm Pete, your host. This has been another Aussie English episode. It's a pleasure, and I'll see you soon.